Hello, everyone. It's Jenny and Laurie, and we are here today to talk about Libra season. Just as a quick introduction for some of those of you who are new here, you can track Jenny down at hiddenpathastrology.com, and you can track me down at lauriefarrington.com. I hope by the time this video comes out, my new website is up and you can find me there. You can find us also on all our social media. There'll be links below. Like us, leave us notes. We like that, and we will respond. And yeah, subscribe to our channel, all of those good things. Now, another thing I want to say, we're talking about Libra season, and we're going to talk about, just the general issues that are going on during Libra season. And then we go into the part where we talk about each sign and how Libra season is going to show up for each of you, depending on the sign that you listen to. If you go below this video, you will see that there are links so you can go directly to the sign that you want to listen to. So those timestamps are important to know that they're there. And we get so many questions. Should you watch for your sun sign, for your rising sign, for your moon sign? People have a lot of questions about that. And basically, I would recommend that you listen for your rising sign. Alternatively, you'll probably get some good information if you listen for your sun sign as well. But basically, these are written for rising sign. If you don't know your rising sign, listen to the sun sign. And the other thing I wanted to say before we jump in is that my book, which is titled How to Read and Interpret a Birth Chart, Guideposts to Understanding Natal Astrology. I have to read it because I never can remember the full name. But my new book is available for pre-order, so you can go and get that ordered. That book is very much directed to people who have a fair amount of knowledge of, the language of astrology, the signs, the planets, the houses. Well, maybe not the houses so much, because a lot of people, that's kind of the last thing people seem to learn nowadays. But anyway, if you have some amount of knowledge of the language, this book is going to really, really be a game changer in helping you understand how to work with natal charts. So all of that being said, what do you have to add, Jenny?
Well, I'm excited for your book, Laurie. I think it's going to be cool because you're filling a niche there's lots of beginner astrology books out there, but there aren't as many like then what books, like how do I apply this stuff? So it's super exciting that your book's coming out. I can't wait to read it. So, yeah. Let's see, I have 2 in-person coming up if you're interested in joining me, if you live in the Vermont-ish area or even over in New York or other places. I've got the Mystical Market I will be attending on October 25th. You can come and stop by my table. It's in Burlington, Vermont. You can get more information on my website. And also I have a class on November 12th, which I'm teaching a beginner class, astrology class through Burlington Parks and Rec. So both of those are in person. I'm working on some online stuff too, but those are the 2 I have right now. So come check those out if you want. All right. That's it.
Come on, Jenny, you don't want to forget. You're forgetting one thing. I'll announce it here. Jenny always puts up a meditation video for every season. So the Libra season one will be out at some point, I assume, around the time that this one comes out. Be sure to listen to those. They're quite helpful. Okay.
All
Now,
right.
with all of that, let's talk about Libra season.
Okay. Well, I guess we should start talking about what the heck is Libra.
What is Libra about? Yeah. It's what is it? It's the cardinal air sign, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
What do the 2 things add to it? What's cardinal? What's air? How do they work together?
Well, cardinal signs are always the ones that start seasons. So Libra season coincides with the equinox. And in the northern hemisphere, that's the autumn equinox, and in the southern, it's the spring or vernal equinox. So they always herald in a new season. So here we are entering autumn for us because we live here in the northern hemisphere. And then also, so it's responsible for starting things. Anybody's got a lot of Libra in their chart, it's going to be something about starting things, starting something to do with air. Now, air is social, air is conversation, communication, and intellectual exchange. So all of those things are part of the air element. Libra in particular is very concerned with, I mean, in a nutshell, it's the other. I mean, Aries is the self, and then Libra is the other. So anybody else you come into contact with that you're having any sort of one-on-one type of connection or discussion or conversation with, that's all part of Libra. It's how you and the way you interact with everyone else around you. So in a way, it kind of mirrors things. Libra is a bit of a mirror for whatever's going on for you. So yeah, there's some blather about Libra.
Yeah, Libra's an interesting sign because it's so different than kind of the pop astrology. At least, when I was young, you'd think about Libra and it was always, they talk about relationship and like, and it is, Libra is about balancing things between you and me. But people would mistake it for some emotional connection of relationship. And Libra is an air sign, and it's really important that we understand Libra as an air sign. Libra
Yeah.
knows how to make relationship because Libra knows how to communicate, not because Libra has this, huge emotional heart to make connections. It's because it's an intellectual understanding of what other people need and want in relationship. That's, yeah, Libra's interesting. And once
Yeah.
you really realize that all of that relating is an intellectual relating, it kind of changes your understanding of Libra, or it did mine.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point because I think I do think about Libra, it is a form of social awareness,
Mhm.
and you're right. Like it's funny because I have a lot of Libra in my family of origin. And it is this desire for some sort of mental equilibrium or some even perceived social equilibrium. You're right, it's not the deep, let's make sure our emotions are all in play here. It's totally the opposite of that. And in fact, that's one of the difficulties about any air sign, is that it can really just be aloof or kind of cut off from emotion when it's operating at kind of, maybe I would say, the lower end of the spectrum, it is an interesting thing that can happen with Libra. So it certainly has a reputation for social niceties and balance and inclusion and let's bring everybody together and let's consider what other people need. And it has that tone, and part of it also when it's out of balance can be codependence, dependency issues, really just relying on relationships to prop you up instead of really doing the inner work of knowing yourself, so it kind of brings all of those factors into play too, especially this Libra season. So yeah.
Yeah, Libra knows how to create relationship. Libra, there's the whole diplomacy thing. Libra knows how to be really diplomatic. But I always, and this is just kind of a silly little thing I throw in around Libra because I think it's really interesting. Libra wants balance. It wants to please everyone. It wants everyone to get along. But I always have this thing in my head that, if you think about Libra, someone with a really strong, lots of Libra in their chart, going into a room where there's a big argument going on. Libra immediately knows that they have a job to do, and they will do that job very well. They will get everyone on the same page. They'll balance things out. And, when they leave the room, there's no argument going on. Everything's nice and peaceful. But then if Libra comes back an hour later and things are still peaceful, Libra has that little troublemaker element that'll like kind of throw a bomb in the middle of things so that it has a job to do. Libra doesn't have a job to do if there's not some discord. And that's
Mhm.
just another interesting thing about Libra, and I don't mean your friends that are a Libra sun sign. I mean the sign itself. So, you're not going to see that always in a person who you call a Libra, but that's kind of the energy of Libra itself, if that made sense.
Yeah, and I want to throw in a couple other things. One is that Libra's also the artist. So let's not forget that Libra's ruled by Venus. So there's a real desire for beauty, for aesthetics, for things that are pleasing, and that there's a real need to be appreciated and to appreciate through Libra. So it really brings in that artistic eye, and certainly a lot of people that have a strong Libra component may very well have a very strong artistic component to their personality. And in fact, my own mother has lots of Libra and she is an incredible artist. So there's that component to it as well. And kind of to take that one step further too, of that idea of like liking things to be aesthetically pleasing, Libra also can be the sign that's associated with justice and Lady Justice. And there's a fierceness to Libra that often gets overlooked. And I think it's some of what you mentioned, that desire to kind of, hey, let's stir things up a little bit. But there can be a fierceness, and there can be a fierceness to Venus that rules Libra as well. And that's all part of this that kind of gets, I don't know, shoved aside in the way our society is right now. And Lady Justice is a serious archetype for that Libra, and that real, desire for people to be included, for people to be brought to the table, for these issues to be handled and dealt with and really looked at and there's a real desire for fairness, so there's something about that piece too that is very much in play in our society right now. So kind of brings in that more edgy side of Libra.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really great. Yeah, Libra is ruled by Venus, as is Taurus. And I always think, it's good in helping to really understand a sign, to think about the other sign that is also ruled by the same planet. So, Venus rules Libra, it also rules Taurus, and thinking about the difference. And it is, with Libra, Venus, it's the aesthetic beauty and the fairness, the justice, all of that. With Taurus, it's more the sensual beauty. And so that's the difference, I think, between them. So
Yeah,
thank
that's
you
good.
for all that. That was great.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, so what about this, switch gears a little bit to this particular Libra season and what is kind of occurring between all the planetary patterns and so on. For this season. And just in a nutshell, there's a really interesting interplay between the air element and the water element throughout this season. Libra, again, is that air sign. So that's certainly got the focus. We do have a solar eclipse in Libra, which really is that need to look at some of the deeper layers of what's happening in your relationships and your own desire for things to seem fair and even. Those kinds of topics may pop up. We'll talk a bit more about that. But there's also this pretty strong water thing happening. There's a grand trine water in the middle of the month that we'll get a little more into, but just this idea that there's some subliminal emotional currents running underneath whatever might seem on the surface to just be about, your relationships, and just kind of on this like top layer of it. There's something going on underneath that we want to kind of get at during the season, especially with the eclipse. But yeah, so just an interplay there between air and water, very simple level, it's communication and emotions. So yeah, and other stuff too, but that's the quick nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting how that water grand trine and the planets over the course of this Libra season, we have Venus moving into Scorpio, we have Mercury moving into Scorpio, and then the sun obviously after Libra will go into Scorpio. So as the planets, Venus goes into Scorpio just a few days, I guess 2 days, or no, the same day as the sun goes into Libra, Venus goes into Scorpio. So we immediately are moving from that air into the water. And then that really gets highlighted, sort of leading up to the Scorpio season.
Yeah, and the other thing that made me kind of hone in on that air water theme is that we had a Pisces lunar eclipse during Virgo season. So that's a water lunar eclipse. And then now we have an air solar eclipse. The water lunar eclipse is also a North Node eclipse, suggesting that we need to move towards whatever Pisces signifies. Laurie and I talked a lot about moving towards compassion, understanding those kinds of things. And then we have this solar eclipse this month, which is a South Node solar eclipse of the sun. So it's sort of the signification of like having to get at what is blocking your ability to have, I don't know, equilibrium in some of your relationships, emotional equilibrium in some of your relationships. So it's a really interesting, there's just a number of ways in which that whole air and water theme just comes into play throughout the whole season. But yeah, just as you're saying, Laura, yeah, that whole preparation for Scorpio season. So there is something about that. And also interesting how the only squares we have this month are to both Pluto and Mars, which also both are co-rulers, depending on your point of view, of Scorpio. So there's this kind of subtext of like, it might look like it's all just about squeaky clean, happy Libra season, but there's these layers that you're having to work with, but you're also very well supported in working with those layers. So I like that about this season a lot.
You want to open up, should we open up the chart itself?
Yeah, let's kind of do a little more of our, whatever it was we talked about, like kind of breaking it down.
Okay, here it is. Here's the chart of the moment the sun goes into Libra. So there we are, the sun at 0 degrees Libra, and just as Venus is getting ready to move into Scorpio. I think that's
nice. Yeah, we kind of kick off the whole season with exactly that theme we were just talking about as Venus squares Pluto that very first day, right when the sun moves in to Libra. So right away, you're getting this like little, page 1 of the book is bringing up these themes. And the sun is right next to the south node there too, which is another signification of having to deal with the stuff in your past or the issues of past that are going to possibly pop up during the solar eclipse. So yeah, that's happening right out of the gate.
right out of the gate.
So Lori, do you want to just like keep kind of talking, breaking down but week by week here with this chart
Yeah,
open?
yeah, let's do that. Let's,
Cool.
I'm sorry, I kind of wasn't hearing what you said a minute ago, so I don't want to repeat. I was having a struggle with getting things set up here on the computer.
That's okay. Yeah.
So I hope I'm not repeating something you just said, but it's just a really interesting point that right before Venus goes into Scorpio, it makes that square to Pluto. Did you already talk about that?
Yeah, no, but you're reiterating. This is what people need to see. No, this is it.
Yeah, I think that that's
Yeah.
really really powerful thing to think about, that
Yeah.
Pluto, it hits this wall with Pluto. It's like there is an issue here. And then Pluto goes deep into Scorpio. So it's really having to manage and go to the depth of what it's really required to, the depth that it's really being required to face.
Yeah, and Venus is it's not its most favorite place to go into Scorpio. So that's but it really is bringing in this subtext of Scorpio, the deeper feelings that are beneath things right out of the gate. So that's kind of the beginning. A couple days later, we have the last quarter phase of the moon with the moon in Cancer. But what I think really kind of shows up this very early part of the season is you have Mercury in Virgo, and it's kind of triggering all those other Earth planets. It does a beautiful trine to Pluto, it does a beautiful trine to Uranus, and it kind of sets up that, like, even though there's this subtext, it kind of sets up the stability right in the beginning of the month. So I really like this entry point. But that's kind of the keynote, at least as I see it, for that first kind of section of the month from September 22nd until we reach the solar eclipse. You have a very busy Mercury kind of setting up this stability. I mean, what do you think of that grand trine in Earth, Lori?
Well, I think it's really interesting because it's Pluto and Uranus. It is, this is a collective story. This is a conversation that we are stabilizing some. I love this. This is really, not to bring in politics a whole lot, but we're making this video the day after Kamala Harris and Donald Trump had their first and possibly only debate. And this makes me think about that. It's like there is an intelligent conversation going on that is stabilizing some of the incredible discord and difficulties that we've been in. Obviously, there's there's issues, and that Pluto, the Venus square, or each planet as it enters Scorpio is facing that challenge. So, you know, it's, yeah, we're not out of the woods here. But
No, but it's
I can't look at this and not bring up the obvious social situation we're in.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, just from an astrology point of view too, Mercury is pretty powerfully situated in Virgo, and it's the one, because it's a fast-moving inner planet, it's really bringing that bigger conversation of the outer planets to us, sort of saying, hey, change is afoot. Things need to shift. I can't help but add here, Laurie, on the tail of your brief comment about politics, that the United States is at the very end of its Pluto return. I mean,
Yeah.
Pluto moving out of Aquarius, which it will do in November, it's the final kind of closing chapter. So interesting to think about the entire history of this country and that little symbol. So just in other words, I just want you to think about those outer planets telling these really big, long, slow stories that are beyond our individual lifetimes. And then Mercury completing this trine is bringing it to us personally. It's bringing during the season. So I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is really interesting. And okay, so
Okay.
all of that going on, there's also in the midst of all of that, I guess I can't quite help but point out also that Mercury is opposing Neptune. So there is definitely some confusion going on as well. Isn't it fascinating that at this time in our culture, we have that,
Yeah, that kite
those
configuration.
three planets, which are the three outer planets that deal with all of the cultural
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah, that's interesting. But they're in a
I
good
know.
pattern together. That's kind of sweet.
Yeah, and I just want to comment here too that the Pisces lunar eclipse that we talked about was very close to Neptune. So check out that other video if you haven't already, because it'll tell you more about the way that, Mercury with its opposition to Neptune, there's a release point here, and it's about those Pisces themes we talked about in that eclipse. So check it out. All
Interesting.
right.
Interesting.
I also
Okay.
think the other thing that happens, because all of this is happening before the solar eclipse on October 2nd, the one other thing we haven't mentioned yet is the beginning of that setup of the water grand trine that I briefly mentioned. So maybe, yeah, thank you. I was like, delete those. And that's because what's going to happen on September 30th, so last day of September, you've got Mars is setting up with that trine to Saturn. And so that's the beginning of that. And then I think we should talk about the solar eclipse next.
Mhm.
So solar eclipse is on October 2nd. It is at 10 degrees of Libra. I don't know. What do you have to say about the solar eclipse, Laurie?
Oh, well, it's interesting because the eclipses have been in Aries and Libra for over a year now, and they are preparing to shift into Virgo and Pisces, which is why this last lunar eclipse was in Pisces. At any rate, one of the things that I've been thinking about with this eclipse is that there's some story that we've been in the middle of for a year or so now, something that's being released in the house that you have Libra. So there's some manner of pleasing others that you're releasing, some manner of doing Libra stuff, overdoing Libra stuff, giving yourself away. There's something that is being asked of you that you're really seeing in a new way because the eclipse is right here, right now. This is not the last eclipse in Libra, though.
Yeah,
Is it?
probably not. I haven't looked at the
I
date.
think there's still
Yeah,
more
there's something.
before it
Yeah.
will end up in Virgo. So,
Yeah.
it's just identifying that point. I think for us individually, just to know where Libra is, and we'll go through that with the individual impacts, but there's something that you're really being called to release. And
Right.
over the next, the next 6 months or so, with the results of this eclipse, there's something that's going away. There's something going away in that area.
Hmm.
What do
Yeah,
you
it's just like, where do you give up your power is a simple
Yeah.
question to think about. And the fact that all the stuff we talked about the Scorpio season coming right after this and what that holds, this is about those power issues. Like, where do you give up your power? And, because of the culture we were born into, there's easier ways to give up your power than others. Then you kind of get unconsciously led into ways of thinking. So this is a time to shed some of that. I think, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, there's
Um,
something really being shed there.
yeah,
And
and I've just
the thing also to think about, because the North Node is over here in Aries, what you are shedding, it might be, you might feel like a snake shedding your skin. It might feel painful, but keep your eye on the opposite house where Aries is, because as you are releasing that dependency, or that whatever it is, that peace, as you're releasing that, it's really giving you the strength and the courage to move forward in the opposite house.
yeah,
It's really
yeah,
giving you courage. You have to let go of something here in order to really tap into courage.
yeah. And because it's a solar eclipse, so it's the sun that is going to get covered over by the moon from our point of view on Earth. Because of that, it's a symbol for some way in which your vitality is being dimmed because of something that's blocking your way. And so it's a south node eclipse. It's a solar south node eclipse. So the solar is the blocking the vitality, and then the south node is saying you need to shed something from the past that is occluding your ability to shine the way that you can shine. So that's I always like that about the eclipses. It kind of gives you these layers of like how to tease through that. And that's what this Libra solar eclipse is saying here. So yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. And then as soon as that eclipse hits, we have this grand trine in water that I've been going on about. I got excited about it. By then, Venus will have moved into Scorpio. And then it's going to trine Saturn on the 4th. And then on the 8th, Venus and Mars trine. So you get between the period from September 30th to October 8th, there's this window of time in which this grand trine in water's in play. And to me, this is just a symbol of like, trust your feelings, trust your emotions, release into the gift of these feelings, because they are there to tell you something. You can lean into them. I have this image of like, kind of climbing down towards a pool of water and then just having to let go of the last rung of that ladder and just drop into it, because it's extremely helpful and supportive. There's some lesson here on a cultural level about trusting our feelings more. I think our culture tends to regard feelings and emotions as weak, and it really does nothing that can be further from the truth. I mean, those feelings are what bond us together. It's what allows you to have empathy. It's what allows you to help other people with healing, to heal yourself. I mean, these are all water things. So I really love that there's the subcontext of this flow here to support you during this solar eclipse. So
Yeah, I think that's great. I think, there's something much more personal about this one, because, it's more personal planets than the Earth grand trine we were looking at. But, there's just something in here about the maturity, really understanding the mature growth that comes from allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
oh, nice. Yeah, well
Yeah,
put.
I think there's, when I see Venus and Mars in a connection like that, this is very much about relationship, and Saturn is here to stabilize these elements, whether they be, yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at that, but this is really stabilizing our ability to open up and trust our intuition, and trust that our vulnerability isn't going to scare people away. It's going to support us to be connected with others.
Yeah, and also, to add to that picture, it's like with Mars and Venus in the mix, this is, each of us, handling our feminine and our masculine sides, like that we all are a mix of those things. And so they're in a really nice play with each other, so this is taking your action, your kind of outward willingness to act on something, and then your more kind of inward, like your more yin part of yourself, and bringing all of those things into play. And so I think this is really nice. And it supports the other air story that's going on here too. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there's this interplay between water and air. And so that's the water piece. And then the other air piece that comes in is that very same week, Jupiter stations retrograde in Gemini. And then a little bit later on, will trine the sun. So there's just this statement. I mean, Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and in Gemini, it's expanding very quickly, and it's talking very quickly like this, and it's really kind of almost going off the rails. And so it's like, oh, thank goodness it stations retrograde, because it's sort of saying, okay, slow down, and and then I think, what was that spaghetti comment you made, Laurie?
Yeah, when we were talking about it, I was talking about spaghetti, throwing spaghetti at the ceiling. Yeah, wherever Jupiter is in your chart, you want to really look at that. And again, we'll talk about it in the individual impacts. But, Jupiter's been in Gemini for quite a while. I don't know, 8, 9 months. It's been there for quite a while. It just is expanding things so quickly. And it's in Gemini, which is such, kind of nervous, gather things quick and expand them. Wherever Gemini is in your chart, you have probably over this past period of time, you've got so many ideas, so many plans, so many things that you want to do and learn and think about. And yeah, you might have been going in 25 directions. I know I have been. And I think that this retrograde is such a relief, because it's like you've been throwing spaghetti at the ceiling. That's what I was talking about earlier. Throwing spaghetti at the ceiling, you don't know what's going to stick. But when Jupiter goes retrograde, you're going to, and as it starts really going back over the terrain it's been traveling, you're going to be able to see what is going to stick. You're going to be able to slow down enough to pay attention to what stuck and what didn't. And then you'll really be able to know where to put your energy rather than having it so scattered. I
Really like that.
love this. Yeah, I love this.
Like the way you talked about it too, because it really does explain, again, you've got this solar eclipse in Libra. So you're trying to sort through what that is. What are those deeper layers of whatever, issues you may have in relationships, and, and in other ways, and then the Jupiter is saying, it's okay. Just like, yeah, let it slow down. You're going to sort it out. It really comes in as a support system here of again, this sense of like self-trust that you're going to be able to see whatever it is you need to see, so that you can handle it, so that you can work with it, and have the conversations you need. I mean, air is just there's a social piece to air. You've got to talk about it. You've got to introduce it somehow beyond just your own internal conversation, your own internal narrative. You got to bring it out. So I think that's super helpful, because it's kind of an intense month in its own way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So then the other thing that goes on, we do have the first quarter moon on the 10th at 17 degrees of Capricorn. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about that, but I just as soon go on to the fact Pluto goes retrograde. Correct, excuse me.
There's just brief mention. I just want to mention that sooner or later, Laurie and I are going to make a video about Mars retrograde. But for now, what you need to know is that on October 5th, Mars will enter that shadow period. That means it's going to hit 17 degrees of Cancer. That is going to be where it's retrogrades back to later. But we'll make a video about that. I just want you to know for now, this is part of a bigger story. So
when does that Mars go retrograde? Do you remember? Do you know?
It's not until December. I think it's December 6th.
Okay.
Or it's early December, and it retrogrades in Leo, and it's going to come all the way back to 17 degrees of Cancer.
So yeah, from now forward, wherever Mars goes, we're going to come back and revisit. Oh, that's interesting. That's very
yeah, we will talk about that more when it comes, because there's a lot of yeah, it's an interesting cycle to talk about. So,
Definitely.
um, yeah, okay, but that was the only thing I want to mention. And then,
Pluto,
then
retrograde.
yeah,
I mean, direct. Geez.
correct.
Let's
Yeah,
be clear. It's going direct. It dipped back in. Now it's heading back. There's no stopping it now. It's going to go into Aquarius on, I think, November 17th, something like that. And then it's going to be in Aquarius till 2043.
oh, good Lord.
So
Yeah.
we are getting ready to, we've picked up whatever it is we've needed to do in that Capricorn house, and we're heading back. Oh, we can think of that in terms of politics too, if we wanted to.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah,
But yeah, but that last kind of section from the first quarter, moon in Capricorn to the full moon, you have Mercury is going to go into Scorpio
right,
right
doing
after it
this.
squares Pluto.
That same pattern that Venus did, squaring Pluto,
Yeah.
then going in.
So that kind of brings in that, deeper things going on with your mindset, or just something deeper that you're going to have to get at. And also there is an interesting little interaction in there too, with the asteroid Chiron. And normally I don't bring that up and I don't want to get super into it, but I want to mention, the reason I'm mentioning it is because what it signifies is there is a deeper opportunity to work with some wound in your life about the way you assert yourself, and there's something, I mean, Chiron's been in Aries for a while, kind of bringing that issue and up. And in this case, it may come to the forefront on October 13th because of it creates a pretty interesting configuration the same day that Mercury goes into Scorpio. So there's something going on there. I feel like that's a pretty intense day, October 13th. It's a pretty wild day, really. Though there's also really nice Jupiter Sun trine. There's that trine. So I don't know. There's something very fascinating about that day to me, where just pay close attention in your own life,
Yeah.
especially if you have Scorpio stuff or Chiron stuff going on.
That's
So
interesting. A lot going on that day for sure.
yeah, it's a busy one. Um, Yeah, and then the next day you have the Sun square Mars, and oh, look at that, Venus opposing Uranus. Yeah, so there's a little bit of an electrical storm happening at the end, those middays of the month, I think, the 13th and 14th.
Yeah.
And ooh, I'm just thinking about where I'm gonna be for those 2 days. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Where will you be? You're going to be with your folks in California. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm taking my aging parents to California so it'll be my mother's 80th.
And what's
Uh,
what's the date you're going to be gone?
oh, I'll just be gone throughout that week. So yeah.
And I have surgery that week. So,
Yeah. Ooh, so you and I have a lot of personal stuff happening that week. Fortunately, Venus is trining Neptune on the 15th too. So that's really, that water theme continuing, the currents underneath, whatever's going on in your life, the real need to reckon with the emotional content of what's
I hope
happening.
my surgeon's not too wrapped up in reckoning with her emotions. Sorry. Oh dear. So then we go into on the 17th, we have
Yeah.
the full moon at 24 of Aries, and that's going to be very close to that Chiron too, isn't it?
hmm
Hmm.
It is. It's going to be right there. So it really kind of brings in the Chiron story, which is kind of the mythic story of, I mean, it is about healing, but it isn't about fixing wounds, really. It's about kind of recognizing what you are carrying, and then how you can work with that, manage that material in order to teach other people about it. I mean, there's a really great story that goes along with that. So that's really coming into play in that last little section,
Yeah, and
before
that's
getting into
we
Scorpio
will be
season.
doing a video about that full moon, and we'll bring in Chiron on that when we
Yeah,
talk about that. That'll be an important piece of it.
yeah. And then the close of the season brings Mercury trine Saturn. So again, reiterating that whole water issue we were talking about, or water trine really support. And then Sun squares Pluto, goes into Scorpio. So that's kind of the, very clear message at the end here. Like, yep, we're going into the underworld, folks. So you're
Ah,
just gonna go visit that dragon right there, and grab that jewel, and
but the
and then
the nice thing is the one piece you missed is on the 17th, Venus goes into Sagittarius. right
Mhm.
before,
Yeah.
right before that. So I think that's going to help with that, going into the underworld. Well, Venus has just escaped it. Venus has just gone into
Yeah.
Sagittarius and is going to explore the territory ahead. That sort of feels to me like, okay, don't get stuck in this. Oh my God, we're going into the underworld. Yes, we are. But, Venus is up ahead, uh, paving the path, heading toward, bringing us into the much lighter area of Sagittarius, which will be another story.
Yeah, and I mean I like that. I always think of Sagittarius as the lantern. So it's like here's Venus being like, oh, I've already walked through that. It's fine. Let me just shine a little light for you. It's kind of because there is some theme here about like, don't be afraid of this darker stuff. Like the more that you're afraid and you try to run away from
Oh,
whatever it is that you think is hidden in some shadow in your life or in your psyche or whatever, the bigger it gets and the more power it has over you. So the message here is adopt that lighthearted Venus. I mean, you're right. That's a great parting shot of Venus to be like, it's fine. Like you've just gotta, you gotta just face it and you're gonna be much better off. And if you bring some humor and if you bring some storytelling and you bring a sense of adventure, you're just gonna be way more equipped to have a little laugh with whatever you thought was a demon, or a trickster and see it for what it is and then allow it to be part of your source of power. I mean, that's the whole story, really. So
and I want to like bring politics in, but I'm not going to.
yeah, do it. No,
It's
I
just,
know there's so much here.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the dark, people have all this fear. It's like Venus is heading into the light. Venus is heading into Sagittarius. That's a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
it gives me some hope. Um,
Yeah.
I
I think
think,
you have to bring politics in a little bit just because even if you don't want to get into the this versus that or whatever, it's painting a picture of what's happening
right,
in the world in America right now. It's what has the attention of America. So to pretend it's not happening is absurd.
right.
Uh,
And I
but
think it's always really important to remember and remind ourselves that these planets are not making anything happen.
right.
They are reflecting what is happening. And that's why, yeah, it's almost impossible not to bring politics in, because it's a reflection of what we're in the middle of. And right now, living in this country, what are we in the middle of? We are in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of that being said, I think that brings us through the month. And I wanted to just open this and give you all a minute to take a screenshot of that. This um, little chart here gives us everything that is going on through the month. Um,
Nice.
do you
Yeah.
should we explain exactly what this? I don't know if this is easy for people to understand what this is, but if you know your symbols, you can just look through this. It starts out
Yeah.
Sun enters Libra,
Is
Venus
it just
squares Pluto, and it gives us the date and the time that these things happen. When it's two planets interacting with each other, it gives us the exact position of the first planet and then the second planet. So you can just go down through this and see exactly when and exactly, yeah, where things are happening. This is in Eastern Standard Time. So if you're in another time zone, you're gonna need to change that.
yeah. No, I think that's great. And the only thing I would add is just these are the moon phases.
Right.
So there, those right there, that's the Cancer first quarter moon, sorry, last quarter moon, and then you've got your eclipse right here. And then 1 week later, you've got your first quarter in Capricorn right there. And then you have the Aries full moon here. So that's how we break these down. I just kind of like doing that because I mean, because the moon is our original clock. The moon is our original timekeeper. And you can look at the moon as long as it's not cloudy, and you can see where you're at in the cycle, so that's kind of how I just like to reacquaint folks with that idea because it's ancient and it's
Yeah.
deep in our bones. But
That's,
anyway, yeah.
I think
And if
that's
this
great.
part
And
is dizzying, don't worry about it.
let me just ask you a question.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting to me, and I don't know if there would be a easy way for you to explain. the eclipse itself happens at 2:45 p.m. The actual full moon, new moon, is at 2:50 p.m.
Yeah.
A 5-minute difference. What's that about?
Well, I mean, all the eclipses are like that. Like the actual moment of the occlusion of the when the moon is exactly lined up with the sun, is not necessarily the exact moment of the new moon, because the eclipses bring in different things into play. So it has to be near the nodes. They have to be in the same declination, which is latitude, and the same longitude, which is the zodiac. So it's blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I
I'm
just
gonna make
wanted
a
to,
little video about that, by the way.
yeah, I
So,
just wanted to bring that up in case somebody
yeah,
was looking at that and got confused. Yeah, it's just not, it's usually not very many minutes apart, but a little bit. Okay, I think that clears us and prepares us to head into the individual impacts, which we will
right,
talk about next.
great.
Okay, now we are going to go on to the individual impacts of this Libra season. So we're going to start out with folks who have Aries rising. Now, with Aries rising, this puts the focus of the Libra season right in your 7th house, which is, that's the area of the chart that refers to, our closest relationships, our spouses, our business partners, sort of contractual relationships is one way to think about it. But yeah, our most important relationships. So this is where the Libra season is really focused. We want to remember that with the solar return, the solar eclipse occurring in this area, the suggestion there is that there's something that needs to be released in this area. And I don't want you to get nervous and think you have to, end your major relationships, but there's something within how you approach relationships that may need to change. You might want to really give some thought to, yeah, how those relationships are. You really are developing an understanding of interdependency as opposed to codependency. So think about those things. There's something in how you allow other people to set the rules in some way, perhaps. But that's a lot of what you want to be thinking about through this season. Now, one thing that really supports the changes here is Jupiter. We talked about Jupiter in the first part of this video. Jupiter has been moving through your 3rd house for quite some time now. And Jupiter moving through your 3rd house in Gemini has probably had you really, your mind very activated. Jupiter expands things. Gemini is all about information. So there's been a lot of expansion around your ideas, possibly related to siblings or neighborhood or neighbors. There's things there that may have been part of this expansion. There may be a lot of kind of nervous energy in that. What is happening here during Libra season is that Jupiter is going to go retrograde on October 9th. At that point, I think it's really going to slow us down in the area where that expansion has been going on and really allowing us to see what parts of the expansion are really worth our attention. So we're going to really be able to slow down, think about our communication, what ideas have been really activated, and what we will really want to bring to our relationships. It's the idea is that something has expanded that will really support the changes that are necessary for you in relationship. Now, there's also, we talked in the early part of the video about the emotional component that's going on. And I'm going to turn this part, the emotional part, over to Jennie.
Fair enough. Well, I think in our lengthy discussion of this whole Libra season, one of the things we talked about is just as Laurie's mentioning, it's the idea that there's a lot of support for this whole picture that has to do with your one-on-one relationships that you're dealing with at the solar eclipse and during Libra season. And it's the support of your own emotional state underneath. And there's a big message here around trusting your feelings, trusting your gut feelings, trusting your instincts, paying attention to your intuition, because there's a lot of great support coming from the more feeling part of you that is really has a lot of good information for you really about the shift that you want to make in your one-on-one relationship. So that's kind of the subliminal sub context here. This kind of like just go ahead and trust your feelings because they really are here to support all the things that you're doing. And also, you know, after Libra season, we have Scorpio season. So they kind of, in a funny way, pair together because we have this solar eclipse and you're being asked to look at some of those deeper things that you need to release. And there's just a lot of, yeah, I think we kind of live in a society that sort of like makes us be suspicious of our feelings or they're not to be trusted. And that's absolutely not true anyway. But particularly during this Libra season, there is a lot of ultimately nourishing support coming from those feelings that you have. So I
So
hope that makes sense.
yeah, no, that was good. Where I'm thinking about this too is like when Jupiter goes retrograde and we get to slow down and look at all of the changes, all the expansion that's happened in that communication sector, determining what to keep and what to release is going to be where one of the places where you can really trust your instincts and intuition and feelings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
And I
wanted to
mean,
clarify
yeah.
that part. Yeah, that's
I mean,
great.
I just think there's so much, you know, the theme here is so much about those feelings and then the way you think, you know, because thinking is air and feelings is water. And so there's an interplay here. But the feelings really offer a lot of guidance to what you really need to do because they kind of help you understand what you're capable of, what are your emotional limits, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
That's great. Okay. Then let's move on to folks who have Taurus rising.
okay, so those of you with Taurus rising, well, let's first talk about Libra season in general and where that's landing. For those of you with Taurus rising, it's landing in your sixth house. Let's just talk about the sixth house for a minute. This is the place of your routines, your practices, all of those habits that you have on a daily basis. You know, how you rise in the morning, whether or not you eat breakfast, do you pack a lunch, how are your sleep habits? Do you meditate, so on and so forth? All of those things are things to think about. And the key piece of all of those really is self-care. Is how are you looking after yourself and essentially looking after your health. That's the whole point. So Libra season very much has your focus on those issues and thinking about all of that. And because it's a solar eclipse, there's sort of a, well, no, very much a suggestion that there's something that needs to be released. There's something blocking your ability to fully step into yourself, to fully occupy your vitality. And it's time to let that go. It's time to kind of understand what it is and then let that go. So no simple task, we know, but that's sort of that's the theme. And then meanwhile, we have added Jupiter into this picture because Jupiter, as crazy and as excitable and busy as Jupiter wants to be in Gemini, it's actually going to retrograde about a week after the solar eclipse on October 9th. And that's really kind of supporting this, like, all right, it's time to slow down, really look at your maybe some self-worth issues, because that's where Jupiter is in your second house that might be causing you to not do the habits you need to do or take care of yourself in the way that would be better for you. So the slowdown of Jupiter is going to give you a chance to really contemplate that and think about that and come to a greater intellectual understanding of what might be, you know, kind of causing you to not be in your optimum place with your habits. So, I mean, that's kind of the, you know, that's one layer of what's going on. And Lori, do you want to take the reins there in the next piece?
Sure, sure. Yeah. The one of the ways I'm thinking about it is, yeah, Jupiter's been going through the second house for a while now, really
Mm,
expanding and keeping your mind very busy around your self-worth, around maybe money, how you make money, how you spend money. There's been a lot of curiosity and busyness going on there. Like Jenny said, on October 9th, when Jupiter turns retrograde, we've got to slow down. If you've got Taurus rising, you've got to slow down around all those big ideas and figure out what really makes sense to expand in that area. And, you know, there's a big piece during this Libra season around this idea that our emotions can be trusted right now. Our intuition can be trusted. There's a lot that really suggests, if you're wondering, you know, what is it that you need to let go of in your day-to-day routines, in your healthcare supports? What is it you need to not expand? You know, what you need to slow down the expansion around these big ideas around money or self-worth. If you're really kind of feeling stuck in your mind around trying to figure these things out, your job really during this Libra season is to just turn off your mind a little bit and allow your emotions and your feelings and your intuition to support the way that you go.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, because there's some other there's definitely a suggestion that there's some other piece coming through as you're working on these like routines and habits that the solar eclipse is showing up. There's also a way in which there's a lot of some of these feelings that we're talking about trusting may very well be coming through your partnerships, your kind of one-on-one connections with people, through community. There might be very nourishing community connections that can be super helpful at this time. And also potentially siblings, or even like just your local environment. So just think about, you know, as you're thinking about the routines and everything you need to be paying attention to, really just drop into that feeling state as well, because, you know, and lean into what feels nourishing, lean into what instinctively feels good, because that's actually where you need to go to sort of shift those habits and get yourself into a healthier place altogether.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that emotional support, I love that you brought up that emotional support is going to be coming from your relationships in general. Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. All right, we're going to move on now to folks who have Gemini rising. So for those of you with Gemini rising, the focus of this Libra season is in your fifth house. The fifth house is, oh, it's the fun house. It's really the area of pleasure, of joy, of creativity. It's yeah, it's all of those things. So wherever you, yeah, let me see if I can talk here. This is an area that the focus is on right now. But what you want to think about is there's something in how you do pleasure, how you give of yourself, how you do your creativity, whatever it is. There's something going on in that area that's suggested by the solar eclipse that needs to be released. There's some way you want to really give some thought to how you express, how you give of yourself, and possibly you're giving of yourself in ways that aren't fully authentic for you. Perhaps you're giving in ways that, you know, you've kind of developed a habit of it because it's what other people expect you to do. So this is a time to really, really think about your authentic way of creativity, your authentic way of giving of yourself. And as you're thinking about that, we want to bring your attention to the fact that Jupiter has been moving through your first house for quite some time now. Jupiter's job is to simply expand. And the first house is our personality, our identity. So there's something with Jupiter in Gemini going through there. You've probably been really exploring a lot of different identities, maybe a lot of different ways that you can show up in the world. And, you know, this expansion in Gemini can be a little bit frenetic almost, like, oh, I could do it this way or that way. So when Jupiter stations retrograde on October 9th, it really is going to slow that process down. And it's really going to give us time to think about, okay, all these ideas of identity or how you show up in the world, all of these ideas, some of them, you know, they're just ideas. Which ones do you want to bring forward? When Jupiter goes retrograde, you're really going to have time to hone in on what's important. And that really getting clear about what's important around your identity and how you express your personality is going to certainly be a huge support in figuring out how to express yourself in that Libra area of your creativity. Now, the other layer, which is the emotional piece, I'm going to let Jennie talk about.
Kick it on over. I was just thinking, Laurie and I both know important people in our lives with this, and it's the person with Gemini rising with Jupiter going through their first house right now is a person who's wearing many hats. And so there's a question around, should you be wearing all of those hats? I mean, you can still wear a bunch of hats, but you're probably gonna have to set some hats down. So that's kind of what this is about for you. And so how do you know which hats to set down? What should you be setting aside? And the slightly more subtle or subliminal layer here is the layer of your feelings. And what your feelings have to tell you at this time is more about like, what are your emotional limits? What can you do emotionally? What feels right emotionally? What feels right intuitively? I mean, those are the things that are really kind of coming to play. And because of where the emotional flow is coming from during Libra season, it's very clear to me that it's to do with your workplace. It's something about the way you earn your money, your livelihood, something about that, your professional life. That's where you really need to tune into those feelings and just let them support you, because they are here in a very supportive situation. And so that's what you can look to as you're trying to figure out, gosh, where do I give up my power? And you can really look into that emotional layer for clues to that. And there's probably a sub story around maybe some self-worth issues, or maybe some way that you're like, some stress around your work environment that's leading you towards that. But that certainly is where the information is on an emotional level.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really important that you realize that you can use, you can just settle into your feelings and trust that your instincts and your feelings are going to tell you which hats to put down and which hats to hold on to, and how to develop that most authentic sense of how you express your creativity. That's lovely. Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
Now, moving on to folks who have Cancer rising.
Okay, so with Cancer rising, you have Libra in your fourth house. So the fourth house is it's actually in a way, it's a simple house, but it holds a lot of complexity. It's simple because it's the house of home. It's home. But home is complex. Home is your family of origin. Home is your physical building where you rest your head every night. Home is inside your heart, your own emotional stability. So there's a lot of layers in the fourth house that this Libra season is bringing to your attention. And part of this is, there's an eclipse. So there's something here that you still maybe struggle with giving up your power. Somehow you give away too much in this area of your life. Perhaps it's to your parents. Perhaps it's to whatever your home situation is. And it's really easy to do because the fourth house it's kind of intrinsic. There's a lot of complications here, a lot of emotional complications. So it is that's what has your kind of attention with the solar eclipse, is looking at the very foundation of your being on a physical and actually an emotional level. And meanwhile, we have also thrown Jupiter in here because Jupiter has a kind of a sub story to tell here, or a supportive story. Jupiter is going to retrograde on October 9th. So that means it's spending an extended amount of time in Gemini anyway, but it's really going back and forth over quite a few mid degrees of Gemini and trining whatever's happening in the Libra house. So the sub story is about slowing down because when Jupiter retrogrades, even though it's all busy and crazy in Gemini right now, when it retrogrades, it by definition is going to slow down and stay put for a little bit and have to reflect on a deeper level of what is, what's going on and what needs to be done in that foundational area of your life. What tweak do you need to make? What pivot do you need to do so that you stop giving away too much of yourself? And essentially that's where the work is during this season. And it's because it's happening in your fourth and your 12th house. This is deep work. This is not simple, easy to access work. This is deeper work on your psyche and on your being. So that's kind of the main central theme here. There are some other layers. What do you think, Laura? You want to pop in on some of these other
Well, yeah,
storylines here?
I'm thinking too, just about, yeah, that Jupiter expansion in the 12th house. Yeah, like you said, Jenny, that this is deep, deep stuff. There's probably for quite a number of months now, you've been doing really deep internal work, but it's probably been a little disjointed being in Gemini and expanding so quickly. It's like really exploring these deep levels of your psyche or your spiritual nature. There's been a lot of expansion going on there, and now you can slow down and try to really capture what's important there, what's important for you to really allow to expand. And that will really support the shifts and changes in the home and family. Now, the other layer is around emotion. There is, during this Libra season, an awfully lot of support from the emotional realm, which is a very personal area for you, that brings in, how you express your personality, your creativity, your whole worldview. There's a lot of emotional components in those areas of your life, which are right now, during this Libra season, standing by to support these decisions, to support the decision of what to allow to continue to expand in your deepest psyche, and to support the understanding of what to release around your understanding of home and family, and what to support there. So,
Yeah.
this is really a time when you can trust your instincts, you can trust your emotional feelings to tell you how to manage this.
Yeah, because I think the other thing is when you have Cancer rising, or actually any of the water signs, really, especially during this Libra season, it's like you express yourself through your feelings. That's kind of the chief way that you express, all the things Lori mentioned. I mean, everything, your life philosophy, the way you move through the world is you move through the world on an emotional level. And so I mean, this is an interesting Libra season for those of you with water signs rising, because there's some significant, especially Cancer, because you've got that Jupiter in the 12th house really stirring up some of your deeper layers of of your psyche. So great time for therapy, a great time for, I would think, like activities to help get space, like writing, like tapping things that help you be a bit more objective, because this one really is sort of keeping you really ensconced in that swirl of feelings. And that there's a great amount of information in there, but you're going to need some way to inject a little bit of objectivity, I think, to help keep you afloat through, such an important time.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that's great. Okay, thank you,
Note
Jenny.
to self.
Let's move
Yeah.
on. Let's move on to yeah, okay. I got stuck there for a minute.
That's right.
Okay, on to Leo rising. So for those of you with Leo rising, the focus of Libra season is in your third house. And you can think about the third house as communication. It's the area where we really gather information. We think about ideas here, and neighbors and siblings, relationships that we don't necessarily choose, that are just part of our day-to-day world. And yeah, communication and day-to-day thought processes. That's how I think of the third house. So, with the focus being in this area, and the solar eclipse happening here, you want to really think about your thoughts. Think about how you communicate. Think about how you manage those relationships with neighbors and siblings. Think about how authentic your own voice is. Because with this solar eclipse happening here, there's a suggestion that there's some way in which you are possibly taking your cues from other people. You're using your voice in a way to try to please others more than maybe you ought to be. So this is a time to really think about what you can release, what kind of dependency on other people's opinions you can release in order to reach your most authentic voice. Now, at the same time that that is the focus of the season, we've got Jupiter up here in your 11th house. Jupiter has been moving through Gemini, through your 11th house for quite some time now. And what Jupiter does, Jupiter's job is just to expand things. And in Gemini, it's expanding a lot of information. It's expanding a lot of ideas around how you receive support from others. The 11th house is the community. I think of it as community of like-minded others that support you to your future. So, while Jupiter's been going through this house, you may be having lots of ideas of different kinds of communities that could support you, or different ways that you could be in community to receive the support. Or you may be just coming up with tons of ideas of what your future could look like, which would require different kinds of communities. At any rate, there's some big expansion has been going on in there for quite some time. It may be a little just frenetic, but on October 9th, when Jupiter stations retrograde, it's going to really enable you to slow down that process of thinking, slow down all those big ideas, and enable you to kind of hone in on what's really important. And that's going to really support you developing your most authentic voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other level in all of this that's around emotion. And I think I'm going to step aside and let Jennie talk about that.
Yeah, the subplot,
A subplot.
the subliminal other piece, is just the simple idea that your emotions play a supporting role here. In other words, it's going to really help you if you take time, perhaps on your own, to really pay attention to what you're feeling in the moment, what your intuition is saying, like what your instincts are saying. And this information is going to be coming through family, potentially, like things in your home life, bumping up against other people's stuff. Like if you have any conflict or anything like that, there's actually great information that comes from that. Really good information about, how, sort of checking about your boundaries and how am I handling this part, this part of my life. And there's also a lot of therapeutic potential coming from like subconscious patterns. So it's a really important time, in other words, just to really pay attention to your feelings and let them guide you in understanding what shifts you need to make, in terms of how you might be giving away your power through your voice, because that's kind of it. First of all, it's supportive, it's helping you. And second of all, it also can provide a deeper layer of information when you're not really sure, especially because, as we've been saying, Jupiter is kind of being like, woo, going through Gemini, and it's really energized in there. And thank goodness it's going into that retrograde place to help slow down. But anyway, like that's what you can really look to, is really just tune into your feelings and let that serve as a guide, as you work through some of this intense solar eclipse energy.
It's really lovely to think about that, just to think about our emotions really standing right by to
Yeah.
help us make the decisions, because there are some decisions that need to be made and to be looked at here. It's
Yeah.
fascinating. Okay, let's move on to Virgo rising.
Alrighty, so those of you with Virgo rising, this Libra season, like every other Libra season, is happening in your second house. That's what it's going to light up. So that means Libra season lights up issues to do with money, possessions, your resources, And then also the more subtle layer of how you value yourself, your self-worth, and even your sets of values, whatever it is you value in life. That's what Libra season is really illuminating. And the indication here is that because we have a solar eclipse in this house, there is some kind of work that needs to be done. Remember that a solar eclipse is a time that's revealing the way in which your vitality might be blocked. And what's blocking it is some old, behavior pattern that you have, or some, cultural construct that you haven't quite been able to get through or get around. Those are some of the things that might be popping up that are really obstructing your ability to shine completely for the individual that you are. So this is a wonderful opportunity to shed that, to sort of recognize where are places of possible codependence, or really just places where you give your power up. And that's kind of the general theme. But there's a couple other storylines here, or supporting actors to this story. And one of them is that we have included Jupiter in these charts. And right now, Jupiter is in Gemini, and it's in your 10th house if you have Virgo rising. So there's a lot of freneticism coming from your workplace with Jupiter there. Maybe there's just a lot of different directions that you could go in, and you're not quite sure which direction is the right one, or maybe a couple directions are right. And it's kind of a little bit of a crazed vibe to that right now. But fortunately, Jupiter is going to retrograde on October 9th. So just a week after the eclipse. And that's going to give you a chance to slow down and just start to kind of, get more clear, think more deeply about what pieces are just fluff that you can get rid of and you don't need, and what directions shall you actively pursue to really take your public or professional life into a new direction. So it's really the connection between your public or professional life, and then how you value yourself and money. I mean, there's obviously a connection between your professional life and money. So those are the things
Fully.
where you want to make some sort of shift. Yeah. So Laurie.
Well, okay. So the subplot underneath all of this, so we look at this and we know that people with Virgo rising have some decisions to make, what they need to release in terms of their own self-worth, or somebody else's voice in their head about how to utilize money, or whatever it is. There's a decision to be made around money, resources, self-esteem, and there's a decision to make in the career around what to let go of and what to pursue in terms of expansive ideas. So Jennie has identified all of that. I don't know, I just kind of reiterated it. But underneath that, what we're looking at is those decisions can be kind of difficult if we just stay in our mind and try to figure them out. But right now, during Libra season, we've got this incredible support from our emotions, from the emotional level. Our feelings, our intuition, our instincts are going to be really sharp and supportive, so we can really trust that in order to make these decisions. That emotional support in this case is coming from possibly from our siblings or our neighbors, our closest relationships, and our communities. And any kind of support that you see with Virgo rising coming from those areas, just say yes, accept the support, because and allow that support to help you make these decisions that are necessary during Libra season.
Nice.
Boy, that just is so clear to me personally. I love that.
I know, right? Yeah. Articulating it yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Trying to work it
it
all in
really
there.
is. Even my
Yes.
neighbors, I'm
Yeah.
gonna say this. My
Yeah.
neighbor, I pulled up my car the other day and started lugging stuff into my apartment. And, I'm getting ready for knee surgery in the middle of Libra season. And my neighbors came running out of their apartment and came running to the car and carried all my stuff upstairs.
Oh,
You
so
know,
nice.
yes, the
Yeah.
support of others is so welcome and so powerful. So if
Yeah.
you've got Virgo rising, look for that. It's right there. Okay, moving on. That got me almost teary. Okay, we're going to move on to Libra rising. So for those of you with Libra rising, this is super personal because Libra is your first house, and the focus during this season is on yourself. If people tell you you're being selfish, don't worry about it. You have a right to be. This is a time to focus on yourself, focus on how you are expressing your identity, how you understand your identity. You want to really, because the solar eclipse is here in Libra in your first house, there's something in the way you're expressing your identity that may not be fully authentic to you. You want to really think about how you may be expressing yourself in a way to please those around you. Think about that. Think about what that actually means to you. I'm getting stuck thinking about certain people. But at any rate, during this time, we've also added Jupiter up here. Jupiter has been moving through your ninth house for quite some time. You have probably been playing with a lot of ideas about the world, big ideas. The ninth house is our worldview, and it can encompass all the things that make up our worldview. It can take parts from our education, from travel, from understanding of other cultures, even politics and religion, not spirituality, but religion. All of these things and our understanding of them, all these big ideas. This is our worldview. So during this time, you've probably been really expanding your understanding of the world, and maybe in a kind of a frenetic sense of bringing together so many ideas you can hardly keep track of them. But on October 9th, when Jupiter stops and goes retrograde, it's really going to give you an opportunity to slow down and think about what of those big ideas are worth bringing forward and what are not. And you can think about your expanded idea of your worldview certainly has a lot to do with how you express yourself and your personality. So this really supports this decision you need to make around what to release in your self-expression, and on the flip side, what you need to gather and bring forward with this new expansive worldview. So those are two kind of places that you're really working on. And then there is a subtext. And I'm going to let Jennie talk about the subtext.
Yeah, well, I think part of while you're doing all this Libra work and reflecting on the solar eclipse and, releasing these sort of dependent behaviors, which might be something that's, and that can play out in so many different ways. But the other part of this is, well, what are all your feelings doing while you're going through this change, while you're trying to understand what you might be doing where you're giving away too much of yourself. And really, there's a lot of information coming from your feelings, and where your feelings are really being activated, according to having Libra rising, is going to be probably in your workplace. Your professional life, perhaps, your work routines, those kinds of things, the way you earn your money, like all of those things. Pay attention to how you feel during those activities when you're at work, when there's anything that has to do with your values. Like, really tune into those feelings, because they're giving you a ton of information about your emotional limits, and about being in flow and trusting your intuition and trusting your instincts. And those are all things that you're going to need as you kind of navigate this solar eclipse that's happening during Libra season. And all of that together is just helping you make a transformation so that you can move about the world in a more interdependent way. There's a certainly suggestion as a Libra rising person that, it might be easy to give away your power, or it also might be easy to be really contrary with people, which is, interestingly enough, another way of giving up your power. So what you're looking for is really the sweet spot, the balance as a Libra person, between, sort of bringing harmony into the picture, but also not like just being argumentative for the sake of being argumentative, which I think we talked about in the beginning of this video. So those are all things you want to think about and just really pay attention to, again, your feelings, because they give you so many clues into what shifts that you really need to make. And they are very trustworthy during this Libra season. At least that's
So,
the
can I
astrology
ask
suggestion.
you a question, Jenny?
Yeah.
What about for a person who's retired and doesn't work?
Which part? You mean
You were
the
talking about with the emotions, really paying attention to your emotions in your career and your day-to-day work processes and making money. But if people aren't working, this
Mhm,
also plays out. It plays out a little different. I guess you would think of it more in terms of
mhm.
your social, just where you are out in the world socially.
Yeah, and I would just say, I mean, you're still going to have to be dealing with money. You still
Right.
have to deal with your values and how you're perceived. You still have routines and habits,
Yeah.
and you're still doing work in the sense of like, even if you have a very small living place, there's chores, and I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and you're still, yeah, I mean, I suppose if you weren't getting out of the house at all, like that might not be as relevant, but it really is any place that you show up in public.
Yeah.
And that's where as emotions arise, just sort of saying here, like, pay attention to those, so
Yeah,
yeah.
those are the areas where your emotions are going to really support these processes. That's beautiful. Okay, let's go on to folks with Scorpio rising.
All right, so those of you with Scorpio rising, this Libra season is happening in your 12th house, as every Libra season does, which brings in, it really brings in some deep layers here, because the 12th house is the most hidden house in the whole chart system. It really refers to things that are behind the scenes. Sometimes that's your own subconscious patterns of behaviors. Sometimes that means that you are someone who works in more of an administrative type role, and you're, kind of pulling the levers of power behind the social curtain, so to speak. And I mean, in general, it's just this thing, anything that's hidden. Sometimes it can even be um like I know I was just thinking of the ghosts. People have talked about ghosts and like these unseen things kind of floating around that you don't really see. So all of those are potential possibilities for what might be brought up during Libra season. And because we have a solar eclipse here, this definitely a time to think about what habits that you need to release, or what behaviors you might need to release that essentially have you giving up your power. So, I mean, in the 12th house, the easiest way for me to think about this would be, if you maybe need to be in a psychotherapeutic type situation, and if you're not handling some of your deeper layers of your subconscious patterns, you're essentially giving up your power, because there's a source of power here, by confronting your own patterns. The 12th house is a little bit tricky to kind of easily explain, but that's some of what the symbolism is in the 12th house. So in any case, deep subconscious processes that need your attention during this solar eclipse. And in the meantime, we also have included the planet Jupiter in these, because Jupiter is it's going to be in a trine position to the sun for the middle section of Libra season. And it's really playing a supporting role in the sense that, well, Jupiter's in Gemini, so it's being pretty frenetic probably, and kind of like buzzing around. And when it retrogrades, it slows down. And this slowing down is exactly what you need in order to, get a glimpse into the window of your subconscious.
Hmm.
Jupiter is in your eighth house, so that indicates this idea that some of that clarity is coming up around difficult interactions you might be having with others. The eighth house speaks of other people's values and shared resources, and that can bring up a lot of stuff between people. So this is another one with Scorpio rising, that we are talking about some deep internal processes that are happening during Libra season. So it's not the easiest to think about and conceptualize how you want to handle those intellectually. I mean, these are deep, deep areas of your psyche. But nonetheless, the solar eclipse is making a statement about wanting to release some kind of codependency or dependent habits that you may have. Yeah, I don't, Laurie, what would you like to add to this picture?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? As you were talking about that 12th house and the Libra season there, and thinking about those deep psychological processes and our understanding of them. I was thinking, well, one way this could play out with Libra there is maybe you've been working with a therapist for years that it's time for you to release that therapist. Just in terms of giving your own sense of your own internal processes away to somebody else. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's something there. Wherever Libra is, we tend to tend to give ourselves away a little bit to others. So you want to really think about this. Is a really deep one, and it's a hard one to kind of conceptualize easily. But there's some process within your own unconscious nature that you need to identify yourself. It's up to you not to give your own psychological understanding away to somebody else, if that makes sense. I love that you brought up ghosts. Because there can be some spiritual, you don't want to give away your understanding of spirituality to somebody else.
Yeah.
You don't want to decide you believe in ghosts when you really don't, but make somebody else happy, whatever. I'm blathering now. But really what you wanted me to talk about, I think, was the emotional component that is supporting this process during Libra season. And there is, these are really deep, heavy things that are going on for you during this Libra season and with the eclipse and all. But the thing that you can really count on during this Libra season that's very lovely is that you can count on your emotions to guide you in the proper way. If you really, you come into the world with Scorpio rising, you are a deeply emotional person. Even if people don't realize that initially, you are a deeply passionate, emotional person. And you can really depend on yourself, your understanding of your creativity, your understanding of the world to support you emotionally as you process this season.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, I like the way you talked about, yes, the idea that, you're passionate and maybe not everyone realizes that, or maybe they do. I would just add that in general, as a Scorpio rising person, like your emotions are the way that you express yourself. You are a person who walks in the world expressing those intense feelings that you have one way or another. And it's interesting because part of that Scorpio likes to also hide that, so it's not readily clear perhaps. But nonetheless, it indicates a person very much driven by those tides of feeling. And that this is a great time to relish the fact that you are used to that feeling space and really trust the information that's coming. I mean, it's likely your person already does that, but now's the time to really lean into it because there's such a good support available.
Yeah, I like this Libra season. I think it's
I
great.
know.
Okay, let's move on to folks who have Sagittarius rising. So if you've got Sagittarius rising, the focus of Libra season is on your 11th house. Now, we want to think about the 11th house as, I think of it as community. It's the community that supports you to your desires for the future. That's really how I look at it. It's like-minded people. It may include friends, but not necessarily. It's like-minded people that support you to where you're going. So with the solar eclipse happening in this area, you want to think about what is the community that you're involved in? What community of people supports you? And how is that, is that the most authentic community for you? There may be some way in which you're involved with the community that doesn't quite feel authentic to you. Possibly you're in a community that someone else, kind of led you into, and you've just kind of landed there. But there's some changes, and it might not mean that you have to change your community, but some way of being within that community that needs to shift. You need to really bring out a more authentic sense of yourself there. So, as you're thinking about what needs to change in your community, we want to bring your attention to Jupiter. Jupiter has been moving through your seventh house for some time now. Seventh house is one-on-one, the most important relationships in your life. It can be your spouse, your business partner, any really, really significant partnership is going to be that seventh house. So with Jupiter moving through there, this area of your life's been really expanding. That could look many different ways for you. It could mean that the relationship you're in is just expanding in beautiful ways, or it could be really kind of frenetic energy of considering all kinds of different partners. Maybe you're attracted to 12 people all of a sudden and you don't know what to do about it. There's many ways that this could be playing out, but the tendency with Jupiter going through Gemini is a little bit of frenetic energy. So on October 9th, when Jupiter stations retrograde, you're going to be able to really slow down and think about all the expansive ideas you've been having around relationship. And you're going to really be able to hone in on what's important and what's not important. And that is going to really support your connection and release of what's unimportant in community. So those are really going to support each other in a very powerful way. Now, in the middle of all of this, during Libra season, there is the subcontext of our emotions. Jennie?
Let's see. Yeah, I was just thinking as you're talking about this one. Yeah, it's like, what information can your partnership give you that informs what decisions you need to make for your community? I like how those work together, because when you think about your own life, it's like, those totally work together, just like how, I don't know, who you're with, and then what, let's say, community functions you go to. So that really makes a lot of sense to me. And then the sort of subliminal currents we've been talking about are kind of the emotional story that's underneath this more social story that we've told so far. And the emotional piece here is just simply, I mean, in a nutshell, it's just like, trust your feelings, trust your instincts, trust your intuition, to guide you in understanding like what shifts you might need to make in these more social realms, like in the community. Like, really look at, like, how do you feel when you're in these social situations? Like, pay close attention to those feelings, because there's a ton of really good information coming from how you feel. And also, they're really supportive. I mean, it's just like, just release into that flow of feelings to really see clearly what shifts that you need to make on the more kind of social mental level. There's just a really nice interplay during this particular Libra season of that. And I feel like we live in a society too that doesn't really value feelings very much. It's kind of like those are weak or what have you, but they really are not. They're really the keys to our sources of power. And when you think about Libra season being, the solar eclipse being this question about where do you give up too much, then it really is clear that looking at your emotions and feeling your feelings is what's going to help you understand, how to kind of, be more interdependent rather than codependent or dependent. So it all really works together as a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bottom line, trust your feelings, because they will lead you into a more authentic sense of yourself in community and making the right decisions in relationship. This is a really powerful time. Okay, we're going to move on now to Capricorn rising.
All right, so let's see, those of you with Capricorn rising, well, let's talk about Libra season first. It's landing in your 10th house. The 10th house is the most public house in the whole chart. So it's really the one that has a lot to say about how you show up in public. For that reason, it's also tied to your profession or your vocation. But it really can be any way that you're showing up in the public realm. Thinking like if you're a celebrity, for example, like you show up in the news all the time, that would be a 10th house experience. So that's where Libra season is really highlighting for those of you Capricorn rising. In this particular Libra season, it's got a solar eclipse in the middle of it. So that is a symbol for this need to kind of go back and reflect on what it is that you need to release that's blocking your ability to shine with your full vitality in your professional or public life. There's a suggestion that there's something that holds you back here. There's a way that you give up too much of yourself in the workplace, or you maybe play nice when you really need to assert yourself more strongly. Or it can play the other way too, like where you're actually overly argumentative. But all of those things, it doesn't matter which direction, they're all symbols of being kind of dependent on exterior things or people while you're trying to just be who you are in your workplace. So that's kind of the central question here is what habits do you need to release, or what do you need to release that's kind of blocking you or causing you to be maybe too meek or too nice in your public environment. So that's kind of the main thing. We also have included Jupiter in these charts, and that's because Jupiter is in Gemini, so it's forming a nice trine aspect to the Libra planets during Libra season. And Jupiter has been in Gemini since May. And in Gemini, it's very kind of busy and crazy, and Jupiter likes to kind of go big or go home. And with the go big in Gemini, it can really play out as a lot of freneticism or nervousness or even anxiety. And that's going through your 6th house of your routines and habits. So you might feel confused about like, what habits do I need to support my, my public work life? How can I, really adopt a better set of self-care routines that will actually support me in my public life and allow me to be more assertive. And the reason why we put Jupiter in here is because it's going to station retrograde. So that means that on October 9th, it's going to slow down and it's going to appear to turn backwards in Gemini. And that is a symbol for you, my friend, with Capricorn rising, to welcome the opportunity to slow down and really reflect on what is happening in your most public life that might need to be switched. And so there's a really nice support here. And you might even reflect on that by going to the gym after work and doing your workout. That might be where things start to kind of percolate. That's just one little example. But these two areas of life are working really well together to help you release something that's blocking you. What other stories we have here, Laurie?
Well, the other piece that we're looking at is, with these two, the Sun and Jupiter, they're both kind of asking that we make decisions, that we, release some way of being in our public life, and that we make decisions of what to not stay frantically involved with, but what to continue in our day-to-day routines. So those decisions, both of these are air signs, and those decisions can get really wrapped up in our mind, and we can go over and over and over it. But the great gift of this Libra season is that we are really provided with this beautiful grand trine in water signs that tells us that there is emotional support available, that what we really, our job in order to make these decisions, we have to trust our instinct. We have to just trust our feelings and really embrace those. And for those of you with Capricorn rising, it really is about trusting the emotional support of the people around you, your neighbors, your siblings, your partner, your community. All of those people in your life are really standing by to support you. There's a lot of emotional support coming from those areas that will really support you in making these decisions and making this Libra season the best ever. So
Nice.
there, I think that covers it. Anything else from you, Jenny?
I don't think so. I think, yeah, that's makes
That's
sense.
great.
Would make
Okay.
sense to you too.
Yeah. So let's move on to Aquarius rising. So for those of you who have Aquarius rising, the focus of Libra season is your ninth house. And this is really, the ninth house is our worldview, our model of the world. Really, it's the big picture of our understanding of this world we live in. Within that ninth house, there's all kinds of things like education and travel and cultural understandings, all the things that kind of combine to make up our worldview. So this is where the focus is during Libra season. And because the solar eclipse is happening here in Libra, there's a suggestion that there's something to release here, some way in which possibly you have tried to please others with your worldview. Maybe the people around you have a particular worldview, and you've just, it's been easier for you to attach yourself to their view rather than actually developing your own. So this is something to really take a look at. How is your worldview truly an expression of your beliefs? And think about that. Now, the other thing that we've added here is Jupiter. Jupiter is down here in your fifth house. It's been in that house since sometime in the spring. And Jupiter's job is simply to expand. It expands wherever it moves. And Jupiter's in Gemini in your fifth house. The fifth house is a house of pleasure, of fun, of creativity, of children as well. This is a beautiful house to have Jupiter in. It's so we can think since I think in May, there's been a lot of expansion in this area. But in Gemini, expansion can get a little bit frenetic. It's like, there's just so many things. There's so many ways you can be creative. There's so many ways that you can have fun. And as Jupiter's been moving through there, like all these ideas of how to have fun keep bubbling up. So when Jupiter stations retrograde on October 9th, it's going to really allow you to slow down and think about, okay, all these ideas, what am I going to do with all of these ideas? Some of them have to be set aside in order for something real to happen here. So and that is certainly, as you express your creativity, as you figure out which pieces to bring into the future of your creativity, that's really going to support your worldview. They support each other, these two areas. So that's one beautiful piece that's going on. And then there is the other layer that we've been talking about. And I'm going to let Jenny talk about the other layer, the emotional level.
Yeah, so in the beginning of this video, we talked about that there was a lot of water happening during this Libra season. And so water really is a euphemism for feelings and emotions, and intuition and instincts and all of these like the sub layers that are kind of hidden in us that are really an ancient part of us. I mean, a really ancient part. And those feelings are playing a supporting role during this Libra season. And the simple message is go ahead and trust your feelings. Like pay attention to them, slow down enough to recognize what they are, what you're feeling, what's happening, and just be with them. And then trust what you learn from that. Trust the way that you feel. Trust your feelings to let you know what shifts that you need to make because they really are providing you with a clear indicator of what is happening on those deeper levels. And it's a very supportive sub story. It's really a lovely opportunity to lean into these feelings and even our vulnerabilities and those those are some of our key words for that, but really leaning into that to understand what is that sort of dependency that you might exhibit somehow in that ninth house of your worldview, or maybe you're trying to make a decision about some more schooling that you need and you're being swayed by different people's opinions, and this is going to be a really good time to listen to your gut instinct on what that's telling you. And just the other little piece is where you might really be able to tune into those feelings are the places in your life that have to do with your routines, your work life, you know, if you have your most public life, your professional life, those are the places where it's going to be really worthwhile to really notice how you're feeling, because there's a ton of information in there for you. So that's, I mean, in a nutshell, it's just pay attention to your feelings and then trust what they're telling you. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. Okay, let's move on to Pisces rising.
Oh, Pisces rising. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, this is always an interesting one. So, for those of you with Pisces rising, Libra season every single year lights up your eighth house. And once again, here we are, Libra season, and there's that sun up in your eighth house. The eighth house is a very enigmatic house in a lot of ways. It is a place of bumping into other people's values, other people's maybe even their emotional baggage. It's the house of shared resources. So there's kind of a contractual piece to it where it's that inevitability of bumping up against something you don't agree with somebody that you've signed on to. And it's just a normal part of human relationships. It's very normal, yet it's not easy to navigate. It's essentially where your emotions or even your unconscious emotions bump up against other people's unconscious emotions. And so there's a lot of symbolism here that can be about conflict. And the irony of having Libra here in this eighth house, I mean, it says a few things. One is it suggests that you might be a person who perhaps gives away a bit too much. If you come into conflict with someone else. On the other hand, it could mean that you're someone who just keeps arguing long past its worth, which is really just the flip side of still kind of letting somebody else yank your chain, you know? And so the question here during Libra season is around, you know, how can you release too much dependence on other people here? How can you be a little bit more authentic and think about interdependence rather than just giving up too much of yourself, or letting the other person get away with too much, or vice versa. So that's kind of the hot topic that Libra season brings up. The other nice thing about having Libra here is it does suggest that if you can pause and get a little bit of space, that you have the ability to find balance here with Libra there. So it just takes a little bit of that wherewithal. And speaking of wherewithal, we have added the planet Jupiter into these individual impact pictures. And Jupiter is in Gemini. It's been there since May. And during Libra season, Jupiter is going to retrograde, which means it's going to slow down, which is good, because Jupiter in Gemini is hyperactive. It's like busy. It's got all these great ideas, and it wants to do this one, it wants to do that one, it wants to do this. And it doesn't necessarily, it can be very ungrounded. And you've had Jupiter in your fourth house, which is, you know, your home, but also your emotional foundation, and possibly relationship with parents. There's a few different things that come into play here. But that's where Jupiter has been stirring up a lot of energy. And when it retrogrades on October 9th, during Libra season, it's going to enable you to slow down, and catch that pause I mentioned a second ago. Like, pause and reflect on, you know, where you might be giving up too much of yourself in these sticky situations with other people. That's kind of the keynote of the season. But yeah, well, Laurie, what do you want to add to this fun picture?
Well, I don't know. While you were talking about it, I was just imagining Jupiter in Gemini moving through the fourth house. And for some reason, I went into this loop of this thought of someone, you know, building a house and trying to make plans, and like, oh my God, all the ideas and all the possibilities, or
Yeah.
someone looking at houses, or, you know, obviously this can come out in family relationships and many other things, but whatever it is, yeah, when Jupiter stops and goes retrograde, it allows us to look at all these wild ideas we've had and narrow in on what's important.
Yeah.
But that was just what I was thinking while you were talking. But we did want to bring in the other layer, which is the emotional layer of this Libra season, which is so supportive and so beautiful to have right now, because both of these, Jupiter and the Sun, doing their thing here in the 4th and 8th house, is asking you to make changes, to make decisions, to, think, it's all in air signs and it's all about the thought processes. But what's really beautiful right now is that if you just rest and allow your emotions to direct you, you're going to be really supported. And with Pisces rising, you're an incredibly sensitive, emotional person. You kind of have that, your heart on your sleeve, so to speak, or however you want to think about that. But your innate emotions and the emotions that you bring to others through your creativity and the emotional understanding that you have of the bigger picture of the world, there's a lot of emotional spaces in this chart that are just ready to stand in and support whatever decisions you need to make. What your job is to trust your intuition, to trust your emotions, to trust your instincts, and you've got it made.
Well,
You'll be
that's
able to
actually,
make those decisions around
yeah.
that house.
I was thinking that part of that picture though for Pisces rising is, yeah, that you've had Saturn in Pisces for a while in your first house. So yeah, this is absolutely a time to step into more authority here and really trust, that intuition for you especially. So this is good news for those of you who are wired in this kind of water way that, now is your moment to really trust and express your feelings, and let those be your guide, in how you navigate these situations that the Libra season kind of might bring up. So
That's awesome. Okay, I think we have finished
we have. All
all
right.
12 of the signs. So thank you, Jenny, and thank you anyone who's still hanging on with us.
Yep.
Thank you, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks. Bye.